Taeyang Choi couldn't remember the last time he had slept in a bed. Maybe a month ago, maybe 3. Time on the streets flowed strangely, smeared into an endless sequence of identical days and nights. Now he sat on the cold steps of Seoul's Central Station, leaning his back against a concrete pillar. An empty soju bottle lay nearby, its neck reflecting the dim light of the lamps. It was around midnight. The station never slept. People dragged suitcases, hurried to the platforms, bought coffee at 24-hour kiosks. No one looked at the homeless man in the dirty jacket with a grown-out beard. Taeyang had long since become part of the cityscape, invisible, passed by with averted eyes. 3 years ago, he was a different person. Dr. Choi Taeyang, a leading surgeon at Severance Hospital, a specialist in the most complex operations, a man whose hands saved lives every day. He had an apartment with panoramic windows, a car, the respect of his colleagues. He had a family, a wife, Insuk, and a daughter, Mina. Mina. Even thinking of that name hurt. She was only 12 when she was diagnosed. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Taeyang knew the statistics better than he wanted to. 70% of children survive with proper treatment. 70%. Mina was supposed to be among that 70%. She was strong, stubborn, fought with all her might. 2 years of treatment. Chemotherapy, which made her long hair fall out. Nausea, weakness, hospital rooms instead of school. But Mina smiled. Even when it was hard for her, she smiled at him and said, "Daddy, I know you'll find a way to make me better. You're the best doctor in the world." He was a doctor. But he couldn't save his own daughter. The last seizure happened at home, late at night. Internal bleeding after chemotherapy, a rare but possible complication. Taeyang watched her skin pale, watched her struggle for breath. He knew what needed to be done. His hands had saved people in critical situations hundreds of times. But at that moment, he froze. Just stood there and watched his daughter die in his arms while Insuk screamed and called an ambulance. Mina died on the way to the hospital. After that, everything fell apart. Insuk couldn't look at him. Every time she met his gaze, she saw the person who hadn't saved their child. She didn't accuse him out loud, there was no need. Taeyang blamed himself enough for the both of them. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Taeyang started drinking. At first in the evenings, then in the mornings, then constantly. At work, people noticed, his hands trembled during surgery. The chief called him in and gently but firmly asked him to take a leave. The leave turned into dismissal. The money ran out quickly, most of it had gone to Mina's treatment, the rest he drank away. Apartment, car, everything was sold for debts. 8 months ago, Taeyang ended up on the street. He thought it would be temporary, that he would get back on his feet, pull himself together, start over. But every morning waking up hurt more than falling asleep drunk. And gradually, he stopped trying. Now he sat on the station steps, staring blankly at the crowd. A few coins jingled in his pocket. Someone had dropped them during the day, mistaking him for a beggar. It would be enough for another bottle. Or food. Taeyang knew what he would choose. Suddenly, the crowd stirred. A shout, short, frightened. Taeyang raised his head. About 20 meters away, a young woman had stumbled and fallen to her knees. Blood flowed from her right hand, dark, frighteningly copious. Nearby on the floor lay a torn bag, its contents scattered across the tiles. People stopped, stared, pulled out phones. Someone filmed. Someone took pictures. But no one approached closer. The woman tried to stand but fell again. Her face was pale, lips trembling. She pressed her left hand to the wound, but the blood continued to seep between her fingers. Taeyang looked at her and suddenly didn't see her. He saw Mina. Mina lying on the floor of their living room, pale, blood on her lips, whispering, "Daddy, I'm scared." Mina, whom he hadn't saved because he froze, because he was not a doctor in that moment, but a frightened father. Something inside him clicked. Taeyang stood. He wavered, the alcohol hadn't left his system yet. He took a step forward. Then another. The crowd reluctantly parted, a homeless man reeking of booze and the streets. He reached the woman and knelt beside her. Up close, he saw the wound was deep, across the forearm, an artery was hit. 5 more minutes, and she would lose too much blood. Step back, Taeyang shouted, glancing at the crowd. His voice was hoarse but loud. I'm a doctor. A few people laughed. A doctor? This ragged man? But Taeyang no longer heard them. His hands, which had trembled from the hangover a second ago, suddenly became steady. Muscle memory. Decades of practice. Hundreds of operations. He pulled off his belt and quickly wrapped it above the wound, tightening it as a tourniquet. The woman screamed in pain. Hold on, he said, and his voice sounded almost normal. Everything will be fine. He took off his jacket, tore the lining, and pressed the cloth to the wound, pinching the artery. The woman stared at him with wide eyes, filled with shock. What's your name? Taeyang asked, keeping pressure on the wound. He needed to prevent her from losing consciousness. So-he, she exhaled. So-he, look at me. Only at me. Don't close your eyes. The ambulance is on its way. He didn't know if anyone had actually called it, but he spoke confidently. So he nodded, clutching his sleeve with her healthy hand. Taeyang checked the pulse at her wrist, weak but steady. The tourniquet worked, the bleeding slowed. Good. He was doing everything right. His hands remembered. Even after everything, after alcohol, the streets, despair, his hands still knew how to save lives. You really a doctor? So he whispered. Taeyang looked at her and for the first time in months felt something close to purpose. Yes, he answered. I'm a doctor. At that moment, a siren wailed. The ambulance arrived at the station entrance 5 minutes later. For Taeyang, those 5 minutes stretched into eternity. He kept pressure on So-hee's wound, monitored her breathing, prevented her from closing her eyes. People around gradually lost interest and dispersed, though a few stayed at a distance, still filming. 2 paramedics jumped out with a stretcher. One, a young man of about 25, surveyed the scene, homeless man, injured woman, improvised tourniquet. What happened? He asked briefly, crouching down. Cut on the forearm, radial artery damaged, Taeyang replied, not letting go of the cloth. Tourniquet applied 7 minutes ago, moderate blood loss. Pulse weak but stable. Consciousness clear. The paramedic raised his eyebrows. This homeless man spoke in medical terms, professionally, clearly. Are you a medic? Surgeon, Taeyang replied. Former. The second paramedic, an older woman, was already unpacking equipment. She quickly assessed So-hee, replaced the improvised tourniquet with a professional one, inserted in 4 catheter. Good work, she told Taeyang. You saved her life. Taeyang silently stepped back, letting them work. His hands began to tremble again, adrenaline fading, body reminding him how much alcohol was still in it. He moved a few steps away, leaning against the wall. So-hee was already being placed on the stretcher. She turned her head, searching for him with her eyes. Wait, she called weakly. That man, where is he? I'm here, Taeyang answered. So-hee looked at him, and in her eyes was something Taeyang hadn't seen in a long time, gratitude. Real, sincere gratitude. Thank you, she whispered before the paramedics loaded the stretcher into the ambulance. The woman paramedic paused for a second, looking at Taeyang. Do you need help? She asked. We can take you to the hospital, check you. No, Taeyang cut her off. I'm fine. She nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes, and got into the vehicle. The siren wailed again, and the ambulance disappeared into the night traffic. Taeyang remained standing by the wall. People rushed around him again, hurrying to trains, buying tickets. No one paid attention to him anymore. Everything returned to normal. He looked at his hands. They were covered in blood, dark, almost black in the lamplight. Someone else's blood. He had saved a life. For the first time in 3 years, Taeyang slowly walked to the public restroom to wash the blood off. His reflection in the dirty mirror was frightening, sunken cheeks, unhealthy gray skin, tangled hair, beard. Someone else's face. He barely recognized himself. But the hands. The hands were the same. The hands of a surgeon. He rinsed them with cold water, watching the blood flow down the sink in pink rivulets. And for the first time in months, Taeyang felt not dull indifference, but something else. Something like a glimpse of purpose. That night he didn't drink. He just lay down on his cardboard bedding in the corner of the station and closed his eyes. He dreamed of Mina, but not dying, alive and laughing. She said to him in the dream, "Daddy, you did well. I knew you could." Taeyang woke up with tear-soaked cheeks. 3 days passed in the usual routine. Taeyang sat in his usual spot at the station, occasionally begging for money, buying cheap food at the 24-hour store. But something had changed. He couldn't stop thinking about that night. About how his hands had remembered who he was. About how Sohee had looked at him with gratitude. On the evening of the 4th day, she came. Taeyang was sitting on the steps, finishing water from a plastic bottle, when he noticed her. So he walked slowly along the station platform, supporting her right arm. It was bandaged from wrist to elbow. She glanced around, clearly searching for someone. Their eyes met. So he froze for a second, then resolutely walked toward him. Taeyang didn't know what to do. Stand up? Run away? He stayed sitting, watching her approach. Up close, she looked better than that night, healthy complexion, clear eyes. A young woman of about 28, with shoulder-length hair and a determined chin. "Hello," she said, stopping in front of him. She held a bag from a cafe. "I've been looking for you for several days." Taeyang remained silent, unsure what to say. "May I sit?" So he asked. He shrugged. She carefully lowered herself onto the step next to him, placing the bag between them. "I brought food," she said. "I hope you're hungry." Taeyang looked in the bag: sandwiches, fruit, coffee in a thermal cup. His stomach betrayed him with a growl. "Why did you come back?" he asked hoarsely. Speaking felt strange. He hadn't talked to anyone in days. "To say thank you," so he replied simply. "The doctors say that if you hadn't stopped the bleeding so quickly, I wouldn't have survived." Taeyang turned away. "I just did what I had to." Everyone else passed by, so he said quietly. Dozens of people. Filming on their phones, staring. But no one helped. "Only you." She handed him the thermal cup of coffee. "Please, take it. It's a small thing, but I wanted to thank you." Taeyang took the coffee. It was hot, scorching hot, and smelled right, not cheap instant garbage, but real coffee. He took a sip and felt the warmth spread through his body. What happened that night? He asked without looking at her. So he paused, gathering her thoughts. "I was coming home from a client meeting. Late, around midnight. In the passage, a man attacked me, just jumped out of the darkness and grabbed my bag. I didn't want to give it up. There was a laptop with my projects inside. I grabbed the strap. He pulled out a knife end. She trailed off, looking at her bandaged arm. He cut me and ran. I made it to the station, thinking someone would help. But everyone just stared. Did the police find the attacker?" Taeyang asked. So he shook her head. The cameras in the passage weren't working. They say they'll look, but they don't have much hope. Just another thief in a big city. They fell silent. Taeyang ate a sandwich, slowly, trying not to devour it, though he was very hungry. "How's your hand?" he finally asked. "The doctors say it'll heal normally. Nerves intact, tendons fine." "Lucky," she looked at him. "Thanks to you." Taeyang didn't answer. He didn't feel he deserved gratitude. He had saved one person. But he couldn't save another, the one person who mattered most. So he seemed to sense his mood. She didn't question, didn't push. She just sat next to him quietly, giving him space. "I'll come again," she said at last, standing up. "Tomorrow. The day after. I'll bring more food. You don't have to talk. Just let me say thank you in the way I can." Taeyang looked up at her. There was no pity in her eyes, only sincerity. "You don't have to," he said. "I do," so he replied. "I need to." She left, leaving the bag of food behind. Taeyang watched her go, not understanding what he felt. The emptiness inside him, his only companion for so many months, suddenly cracked. Just a little. But he felt it, so he kept her word. The next evening she came again, with food, coffee, and a warm jacket. Taeyang tried to refuse the jacket, but she simply placed it next to him and left. He gave in and wore it that night when the temperature dropped. The jacket was too big, clearly men's, but warm. She came every day at the same time, around 7 in the evening. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they just sat in silence. Taeyang got used to her presence. It was strange, having something constant in his drifting, formless existence. On the 5th day, so he sat next to him and said, "Tell me about yourself." Taeyang looked at her warily. "Why?" "Because I want to know," she replied simply. "You saved my life. You said you're a surgeon. How did you end up here?" A long silence. Taeyang looked at the station lights, at the people rushing by. Part of him wanted to stand up and leave. But another part, the part he had buried under alcohol and despair, wanted to speak. Wanted someone to know. "I had a daughter," he began hoarsely. "Mina. She was 12 when she got sick. Leukemia." So he listened silently, not interrupting. "I was a surgeon. A good surgeon. Saved lives every day. But I couldn't save her." Taeyang's voice trembled. "When the bleeding started, I just froze. Couldn't think, couldn't act. I was not a doctor, but a scared father. And she died." The words poured out as if a dam had broken. "My wife, Insuk, couldn't forgive me. Couldn't look at me. We divorced. I started drinking. Lost my job. Lost everything. 8 months ago, I ended up here." He fell silent. So he was quiet for a long time too, processing what she heard. "You're not at fault," she said at last. "You did everything you could." "No," Taeyang answered sharply. "I didn't. I froze. I failed her." "You were a father losing a child," so he said quietly. "No one can remain a doctor in that moment. You are human, not a robot." Taeyang shook his head. But it wasn't enough. So he looked at him directly. "For me it was," she said. "You saved me. Drunk, homeless, broken, but you didn't pass by. You stopped. That means something. That means you're still the person you were." Taeyang felt something tighten in his chest. He hadn't cried since the night Mina died. But now tears rose to his throat. "I don't know how to live from here," he whispered. "Every day I wake up and remember. Every day." "I know," so he said. "I know what it means to lose too." She didn't tell her story that day. She just sat quietly while Taeyang worked through his emotions. When she left, he didn't buy alcohol with his last money for the first time in months. He just went to sleep sober. The following weeks changed something fundamental. So he continued to come every evening. Gradually, Taeyang began to tell her more about his work, how he became a surgeon, about Mina and her love for drawing. So he listened, sometimes asked questions, never judged. One day she told him about herself. She was a freelance graphic designer, working with small companies, creating logos, websites, and advertising materials. She lived alone in a small studio on the outskirts of Seoul. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 23. She was an only child, just as Taeyang had been. "I know what it's like to be alone," she said. "After they died, I barely left the house for 2 years. I worked, ate, slept. Nothing else. I thought I would live the rest of my life like that." "What changed?" Taeyang asked. So he paused. "I realized they wouldn't have wanted me to just exist. They wanted me to live. Truly live. It was hard, but I started going out. Found a support group for people who had lost loved ones. Met people. Gradually came back to life." She looked at Taeyang. "You can too. It's hard. It might be the hardest thing you've ever done. But you can." Taeyang didn't answer then. But her words stuck in his mind. A week after that conversation, something unexpected happened. So he came not alone, she carried a small backpack. I have a proposal, she said, sitting down beside him. I have a guest room. Small, just a sofa and a desk. But it's a roof over your head. You can stay there until you get back on your feet. Taeyang looked at her, stunned. Why are you doing this? Because I want to help, so he replied simply. You saved my life. Let me try to save yours. You don't even know me, Taeyang said. I could be anyone. Dangerous. Unstable. Maybe, so he nodded. But I don't think you are. I'm good at judging people. And I see that you're a good person who got lost. Everyone needs help finding their way back sometimes. Taeyang remained silent for a long time. Pride told him to refuse. Shame told him he didn't deserve help. But exhaustion, deep, bone-deep exhaustion, told him to accept it. To try. I don't know if I can, he whispered. I've tried so many times. And I failed. I know, so he said. But this time you won't be alone. I'll be here. Not as a nanny, not as a savior. Just as someone who understands. Taeyang looked at his hands, dirty, trembling, the hands of a former surgeon turned homeless man. All right, he said at last. I'll try. So he smiled. For the first time in all these weeks he saw a real smile. Then let's go. We'll start right now. She helped him stand. Taeyang took his few belongings, a bag with documents he had miraculously kept, a spare t-shirt. That was all he owned. They left the station together. Taeyang looked back at the steps where he had spent so many months. A place that had been both his hell and home. He was leaving it, feeling a strange mix of fear and hope. Maybe he could do it. Maybe this was the start of something new. Or maybe he would fall again and lose his last chance. But so he held his hand, firm and steady. And Taeyang decided to believe this time would be different. So-hee's apartment was exactly as she had described, a small studio on the 4th floor of an old building. The guest room was more like a storage room with a window, a narrow space fitting only a sofa bed and a small table. But to Taeyang, it felt like a palace after months on the street. The bathroom is there, so he pointed to the door. Towels in the cabinet. You can take a shower while I make something to eat. Taeyang stood in the middle of her apartment, feeling extremely out of place. He saw his reflection in the window, dirty, overgrown, wild-eyed. So he lived here, in this clean, cozy space. And he had brought the smell of the streets and despair. I'm not sure this is right, he muttered. So he stopped on her way to the kitchen. Right or wrong, we're already here. Go, take a shower. Hot water works wonders. Trust me. Taeyang hesitated but went into the bathroom. It was tiny, a shower cabin, sink, toilet. But clean. He stood for a long time before the mirror, examining the stranger in his reflection. The shower was indeed a miracle. Hot water washed away months of dirt, sweat, shame. Taeyang stood under the streams until the water cooled. When he came out, wrapped in a towel, clean clothes, sweatpants and a t-shirt, clearly men's, hung on the door handle. At dinner, simple but tasty rice with vegetables, so he noticed his questioning look at the clothes. These are my father's clothes, she said calmly. After they died, I couldn't throw some things away. I think he'd be happy they're useful. Taeyang nodded, unsure what to say. They ate in silence, but the quiet was comfortable, not tense. Tomorrow we'll enroll you in an alcohol treatment program, so he said, clearing the dishes. There's a free clinic nearby. They work with homeless and uninsured people. I've tried before, Taeyang admitted. Twice. I relapsed both times. This time will be different, so he said with a confidence he didn't feel. Because this time you won't be alone. That night, Taeyang lay on the sofa in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. The room was warm. The sofa soft. He was clean, fed, sober. All of this should have brought relief. But instead, he felt panic. What if he fails again? What if he can't do it? So he believes in him, but he doesn't believe in himself. She opened her home, her trust. And he, a man who couldn't save his own child. A man who chose the bottle over the fight. Taeyang closed his eyes and tried to sleep. But he dreamed of Mina. She stood before him, so small, wearing the same headband she had after losing her hair. "Daddy," she said in the dream. "I don't want you to live like this. Please try again." He woke at 3 in the morning with tear-soaked cheeks. The craving for alcohol was a physical pain. His hands shook, his stomach twisted in knots. He knew where the nearest 24-hour store was. He knew how easy it would be to slip out of the apartment. But instead, he stayed lying down, clenching his fists so hard that his nails dug into his palms. He didn't sleep until dawn. He just lay there, fighting himself. When the sun began to pierce through the curtains, Taeyang was still sober. It was a small victory. But it was a victory. The first weeks were hell. Taeyang went through classic withdrawal, tremors, nausea, hallucinations. The clinic doctors gave him medicine to ease the symptoms, but nothing could erase the mental pain. The urge to drink was a constant background noise in his mind. So he was there. Every day she walked him to the clinic and picked him up after therapy sessions. When he felt particularly bad, she just sat in the room, working on her laptop, letting him know he wasn't alone. Twice he relapsed. The first time, 10 days in, he bought a bottle of soju on the way back from the clinic and drank it all in the park. He returned to Sohee drunk and full of shame. She didn't yell or scold. She just helped him lie down, and in the morning they started again. The second relapse happened 3 weeks later. This time it was worse. He disappeared for an entire day, drinking until he passed out. He woke up in the police station, where he had been taken for minor misconduct. So he came for him, silently retrieved him, and brought him home. "I can't," Taeyang kept repeating, sitting on the bathroom floor. "I can't. I'm weak. I won't make it." "You can," Sohee said firmly. "You've already lasted longer than you thought. Relapses are part of the process. You didn't give up. You're still here. That's what matters." Gradually, the gaps between relapses grew. A week. 2 weeks. A month. Taeyang began attending a support group for people with addictions. He listened to others' stories, shared his own. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone in his pain. 2 months later, the clinic doctor told him he was making excellent progress. 3 months in, Taeyang realized an entire week had passed without him thinking about drinking even once. Alongside his alcohol treatment, so he helped him with paperwork. Restoring his passport, medical license, finding a job, each step was a mountain to climb. But they tackled it together, step by step. Taeyang started volunteering at the free clinic for the homeless, the same one where he had been treated for addiction. He couldn't perform surgeries yet, didn't have the right to practice without a full license. But he could help, treat wounds, check blood pressure, consult with nurses. His hands stopped shaking. His mind cleared. For the first time in 3 years, Taeyang felt alive. Not happy, happiness was still far away. But alive. And somewhere along the way, he fell in love with Sohee. It came gradually, almost unnoticed. He fell in love with the way she frowned over her design projects, the way she laughed at silly jokes, her stubbornness, her kindness, her ability to believe in him when he didn't believe in himself. One evening, as they sat on her small balcony, drinking tea and watching the sunset, Taeyang suddenly realized he didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay here, with her, forever. But he was afraid to say it out loud. What if she didn't feel the same? What if she was helping him out of obligation, out of gratitude? He couldn't risk losing her friendship. So he stayed silent, simply enjoying her presence. 4 months had passed since Taeyang moved in with Sohee. Autumn had turned into late spring. The city bloomed with greenery and warmth. Taeyang had been sober for 2 months straight, a personal record. His health had improved, he had gained weight, his face no longer looked gaunt. The clinic offered him a paid position as a medical assistant. Not much, but honest money, the first he had earned in nearly a year. Taeyang began saving, planning to rent his own apartment. Not because he wanted to leave Sohee, but because he felt he could no longer take advantage of her kindness. But before he could take that step, something happened that changed everything. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Taeyang returned from the clinic around 8 in the evening, tired but satisfied. He had helped a young homeless man with an infected wound, and the intervention was successful. Entering the apartment, he noticed Sohee sitting on the living room floor, her face buried in her knees. Her shoulders shook. She was crying. Sohee? Taeyang quickly approached, kneeling beside her. What happened? She lifted her head. Her eyes were red, her face wet with tears. Her voice broke. Today is the anniversary. 5 years ago, my parents died. Taeyang froze. All these months, Sohee had been strong, confident, the one who supported him. He had almost forgotten that she had her own pain, her own scars. I'm sorry, Sohee whispered. I didn't mean you've been through so much already. I didn't want to burden you with my problems. Hey, Taeyang said gently, sitting down beside her. You held me for months when I was struggling. Let me hold you now. He awkwardly hugged her, and Sohee pressed against his shoulder, sobbing. They stayed like that until her tears subsided. Every year on this day, it feels like I'm falling back, she said quietly. Like all 5 years of therapy and healing didn't matter. Like I'm that girl again, who got the call from the police and found out her parents were dead. I know, Taeyang said. On Mina's death anniversary, it's the same. Every year on that day, I lose my mind. Last year, I drank so much I don't remember 2 days. So he looked at him. And this year? The anniversary was a month ago, right? Taeyang nodded. This year I was sober. I went to the cemetery, laid flowers on her grave. Talked to her. Cried. But didn't drink. Because, he hesitated. Because you were there. And I didn't want to let you down. So he looked at him for a long moment. Something shifted in the air between them. Taeyang, she began slowly. Why are you doing this? Why are you staying sober, working, fighting? He knew the answer. He had known since that evening on the balcony when he realized he was in love. But saying it aloud terrified him. At first, for Mina, he said honestly. Because she would have wanted me to live. But then, he took a breath. Then for you. Because you believe in me. Because you didn't pass me by when everyone else did. Because damn it, Sohee, I'm in love with you. I don't know when it happened, but it did. Silence fell. Taeyang looked down, afraid to meet her gaze. I'm sorry, he murmured. I shouldn't have said that. You were helping me, and I. Stop, Sohee interrupted. When he looked up, she was smiling through the remnants of her tears. Stop. I'm in love with you too, idiot. I thought you'd never notice. Taeyang blinked, unable to believe what he had heard. Really? Really? Sohee nodded. About 2 months ago. You were coming back from the clinic, talking about a patient you helped. Your eyes were shining. For the first time, I saw not a broken man, but the doctor you used to be. And I realized I love you. Both, the person you were and the person you're becoming now. They looked at each other, and the world narrowed to this moment, this room, these two people who found each other in the darkest corners of their lives. Taeyang reached out, touched her cheek, wiping away the last tear. May I kiss you? He whispered. Instead of answering, so he leaned in and kissed him first. Softly, gently, with such tenderness that it took Taeyang's breath away. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. We're pretty crazy, aren't we? So he said. Two broken people, trying to fix each other. Probably, Taeyang agreed. But I think we're doing all right. She laughed and kissed him again. For the first time in many years, Taeyang felt something close to happiness. The following months were a period of transformation. Taeyang and Sohee officially became a couple, although little changed in their daily routine. They already spent all their time together. But now there was closeness that hadn't been there before. Warm hugs in the morning. Kisses before bed. The knowledge that they weren't just helping each other survive, they were building something new together. Taeyang continued working at the clinic, gradually expanding his responsibilities. His medical license had been temporarily suspended after his dismissal, but he began the process of restoring it. This required documents, rehabilitation certificates, and recommendation letters. So he helped him with all of it, using her organizational skills. 8 months after that night at the station, Taeyang received a letter from the medical board. His license was conditionally restored, with a 1-year probation. He could practice as a surgeon again, but under supervision. The city hospital where he had once worked didn't take him back. Too much baggage, too many risks. But a public hospital on the outskirts of Seoul offered him a position as a junior surgeon in the emergency department. The salary was lower than before. The working conditions were worse. But Taeyang accepted the offer without hesitation. His first operation after returning was simple, an appendectomy on a teenager. Taeyang stood at the operating table, scalpel in hand, and his hands did not tremble. They were firm, confident, surgeon's hands. The operation went smoothly. When he stepped out and told the parents that their son was fine, their gratitude reminded him why he had chosen this profession. He was saving lives. That was who he was. Not the past, but the present. So he was thriving too. Her freelance work took off. She began receiving larger projects, collaborating with medical institutions to create educational materials. It had started by chance, when she helped the clinic where Taeyang worked redesign their informational brochures. But it turned out she had a talent, creating visual information that helped people understand complex medical topics. Maybe we were always meant to work together, she joked one day. You save lives, I make them look good. They moved into a larger apartment, 2 rooms, a real kitchen, and a balcony overlooking a park. Every morning Taeyang woke up next to Sohee and still couldn't believe it was real. That he was here, sober, working, loved. But there were difficult days too. Moments when the urge to drink surged like a wave. After an especially hard shift at the hospital, when he lost a patient. On Mina's death anniversary. In moments when old demons whispered that he didn't deserve this new life. On those days, Sohee was there. Not solving his problems, but simply being present. Reminding him why he fought. A year after their first kiss, Taeyang made a decision. They were sitting on the balcony of their new apartment, drinking tea and watching the sunset, their little ritual. I want to show you something, Taeyang said. Tomorrow. If you're free. What is it? So he asked, curious. You'll see, he replied evasively. The next day was sunny and warm. They took a taxi and drove out of the city. So he realized where they were going when she saw the cemetery gates. Taeyang, she began. I want you to meet Mina, he said simply. Really meet her. The grave was modest but well kept. Taeyang came here once a month, bringing fresh flowers. Today he placed a bouquet of tulips. Mina loved tulips, and knelt down. Hello, my girl, he said softly. I've brought someone very important to you. This is Sohee. The one I've told you about. Sohee stood beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. She's incredible, Taeyang continued, his voice trembling. She saved me when I thought there was no saving. She taught me that it's possible to love again, to live again. And I know you would have loved her. He paused, fighting back emotions, then pulled a small box from his pocket. Mina, he said, looking at the grave. I want Sohee to be part of our family. I want to ask her to marry me. And I need your blessing. Tears ran down his cheeks, but he smiled. I'll never forget you. You will always be my daughter, my angel. But I want to live. I want to be happy. I want to honor your memory by being the best person I can be. And Sohee is helping me with that. He turned to Sohee, still kneeling. She was already crying, covering her mouth with her hands. Sohee, Taeyang said, opening the box. Inside was a simple silver ring. You saved me that night at the station when you didn't walk away. You continue to save me every day. Will you be with me? Forever? Sohee knelt beside him, hugging him, crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, of course yes. They kissed, held each other, cried together by Mina's grave. Taeyang felt deep in his soul that his daughter blessed them. That she wanted him to be happy. That she was proud of him. The wedding took place 3 months later, at the beginning of summer. They didn't want anything grand, just a small ceremony in a cozy cafe that Sohee found in an old part of the city. The place was warm, with vintage furniture and large windows letting in sunlight. There were few guests, but all of them mattered. Taeyang's colleagues from the hospital, including the chief who gave him a second chance. Patients he had saved over the past year, an elderly woman after a heart attack, a young man after a car accident. People from the support group who helped him through the darkest days. Sohee's friends, few, but close. Her former colleague, who had worked with her before she went freelance. A neighbor who had helped her when she first moved to Seoul. And Insuk. Taeyang had invited her, not knowing if she would come. They hadn't seen each other for 2 years, hadn't spoken after the divorce. But he wanted her to know he had changed. He was not the man he had been. Insuk came. She looked well, slimmer, with a new haircut, and a light suit. When their eyes met, she nodded. She didn't smile, but she nodded. That was something. The ceremony was simple. There was no priest, only a registrar who read their vows. Taeyang and Sohee wrote them themselves. I promise to be here, Taeyang said, holding her hands. In good days and bad. When it's easy and when it's hard. I promise not to run, not to hide, not to take the easy way out. I promise to fight, for us, for our love, for the life we are building together. His voice trembled, but he continued. You taught me that falling is not the end. That you can hit rock bottom and still rise. That the past does not define the future. That love is not just happiness, but the choice to stay, even when it's hard. I choose you, Sohee. Today and every day after. Sohee cried, but she smiled. I promise not to try to fix you, she said. Because you are not broken. You are a person who has endured pain and emerged stronger. I promise to see you, the real you, with all your scars and cracks. And to love you as you are. She squeezed his hands tighter. You saved my life that night at the station. But in reality, we saved each other. You reminded me that pain can have a purpose. That helping someone else is a way to heal yourself. I choose you, Taeyang. Today and always. They exchanged rings, simple silver bands with engravings inside. On Taeyang's ring, you didn't walk away. On Sohee's, you stayed. When they were pronounced husband and wife and kissed, the guests applauded. But Taeyang heard only the beating of his own heart. Alive, strong, full of hope. After the ceremony, there was a small celebration. Food, music, dancing. Taeyang danced with Sohee, awkwardly, because he had never been a good dancer. But she didn't care. She laughed, pressed against him, and it was the most beautiful sound in the world. Later, Insuk approached them. Taeyang tensed, unsure of what to expect. Congratulations, she said simply. You both look happy. Thank you, Taeyang replied. Thank you for coming. Insuk looked at him for a long moment. I was angry at you for a very long time, she admitted. Angry that you gave up. That you chose alcohol over fighting. That you left me alone with the pain. Taeyang nodded, accepting her words. But then, Insuk continued, I realized we were both doing the best we could. I shut myself off, you were destroying yourself. Neither way was right. But we survived. And I'm glad you found your way back. She extended her hand. Taeyang shook it. Mina would be proud of you, she said softly. I'm proud too. She left shortly after that, but something had changed. The old wound hadn't fully healed, perhaps it never would. But it no longer bled. The celebration ended late. Taeyang and Sohee returned to their apartment, tired but happy. They stood on the balcony, looking over the city bathed in night lights. You know, Taeyang said, hugging Sohee from behind, a year ago I was sitting at the station thinking my life was over. That I would spend the rest of my days on the streets and die in some alley. And I was okay with that. And now? Sohee asked softly. Now I'm married to an incredible woman. I'm a doctor again. I'm sober. I'm happy. The last word slipped out with surprise. I never thought it was possible. But it is. So he turned in his embrace. You know what's the most amazing thing? She said. Everyone thinks you saved me that night. And that's true. But honestly, I think we saved each other. You needed a reason to keep going. I needed a reminder that life is fragile and precious. We met at the right moment. Taeyang kissed her forehead. Maybe Mina arranged this, he murmured. Somewhere up there. Decided her dad needed help. So he smiled. Maybe. If so, thank her. For bringing me to you. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other as the city slept around them. Two people who had lost everything and found each other. Who had hit rock bottom and risen together. Who had learned to live again. Deep inside, Taeyang felt Mina's presence. Not sad, but joyful. She was part of his past, but no longer an anchor dragging him down. Now she was a guardian angel, blessing his new path. I love you, Taeyang whispered to Sohee. I love you, she whispered back. And life went on. Not perfect, not without challenges. But a life full of meaning, love, and a second chance. A life worth fighting for.